The date is September 8th, 1918. The weather is fair in the upper 60s with a chance of rain. Just another autumn day in Chicago. Les Miserables was playing at the Pantheon in Uptown. William Thompson was the mayor. And the Great War was only a couple months from ending. On that same ordinary autumn day in Chicago, sailors at the Great Lakes Naval Training Station, located 32 miles north of Chicago, became ill. They were treated for their symptoms and held in quarantine. Soon after, the infection was reported in other divisions. In the hope of containing the disease, a quarantine was initiated across the board. Surprisingly, visitors were still permitted at the military camps. The Spanish flu has reached Chicago. Early on, the outbreak was believed to have been successfully slowed. The Chicago Health Commissioner, John Dill Robertson, said he would do nothing to interfere with the morale of the community. It is our duty to keep the people from fear. Worry kills more than the epidemic. But the calm they were experiencing was just the ebb before the tidal wave of death to come. Josie Brown, a Navy nurse stationed at the Great Lakes Naval Training Station, wrote, "The morgues were packed almost to the ceiling with bodies stacked one on top of another. The morticians worked day and night." Pathologists described the condition of the lungs from the victims to resemble the outcome of inhaling poison gas. The immune system reacted so violently to the disease it contributed to the death of the infected. To further slow down the spread of the disease, public venues were shut down that were not essential to the war, like dance halls, restaurants, pool rooms, even public funerals. They also prohibited smoking on the L because smokers are more likely to spit and throw their used cigarettes on the ground, which is still a restriction today. Due to the war, you can imagine there was a severe shortage of nurses. The scarcity was also contributed by the prejudice-based decisions on employment. The profession was relegated nearly entirely to white females, creating an unnecessary shallow pool of eligible student nurses. The Chicago chapter of the American Red Cross issued a call to the public for more nurses, but this new wave of students would have a condensed program to only 6 months with less pay, which was criticized by some fully trained nurses. Churches and synagogues were allowed to remain open, but with strict guidelines to keep the buildings well ventilated and the services short. They contributed by organizing soup kitchens and caring for the sick when nurses were a short supply. In the US, 28% of the population was infected, and 675,000 people died. Globally, the death rate took nearly 5% of the population. The Spanish flu wreaked so much havoc in Chicago, crime actually plummeted by over 40% during that year, while 2,264 individuals lost their lives. To accurately illustrate the fear and despair that consumed the city and the nation, it can be expressed in this poem by J.P. McEvoy, who spent much of his career in Chicago during that time. It's called The Flu. When your back is broke and your eyes are blurred, and your shin bones knock and your tongue is furred, and your tonsils squeak and your hair gets dry, and you're doggone sure that you're going to die. But you're scared you won't and afraid you will. Just drag to bed and have your chill, and pray the Lord to see you through, for you've got the flu, boy, you've got the flu. You can read the rest of the poem in the description below. The disease reached its apex by the end of September, and by early October, the first batch of vaccines was shipped, and by the end of the month, the vaccinations started to take effect. Chicago pulled itself out of the misery, and slowly life returned to normal. The pandemic finally came to an end during the summer of 1919. The Spanish flu claimed 4 times the number of lives lost in World War I. Just to clear up a myth, but I'm sure many of you already know, the Spanish flu did not start in Spain. During World War I, the nations at war suppressed the news of the infection to maintain morale and not appear vulnerable. And since Spain was neutral, they reported on the virus. The name was further rooted when the King of Spain, Alfonso XIII, fell ill to the virus, but he later recovered. We are at the footsteps of what can turn into another pandemic with the coronavirus. But this time around, we have the means to communicate in ways that never could have been imagined a century ago, even just a couple decades ago. It will be interesting to see how history will be remembered years from now. Until then, please hit the like button and subscribe, and please feel free to enter a comment below. I would love to read them. If you have any ideas for future videos based on Chicago or the surrounding area, I would love to hear that too. Thank you.